This collection of stories is best experienced with headphones. All stories are original, written and produced for your enjoyment by Obsidian Murmurs. If you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing. The video contains brief lightning flashes that may affect some viewers. Let's begin. The rain began the same day I moved in. Not a passing shower, but the long, patient kind of rain Tokyo gets in the monsoon, steady enough that even the traffic sounds like it's underwater. By the time the movers left my tiny apartment in Narima, the hallway was already damp, and the fluorescent light outside my door buzzed like a mosquito trapped under glass. I'd come to Japan from London 6 months ago for work, a small translation firm that promised too little money and too much overtime. Those first months passed in a blur of training, language lessons, and finding my footing in a new country. The company had put me up in a cheap business hotel during my probation period, but once it became permanent, I needed my own place. This little apartment was the first thing I could afford. I spoke enough Japanese to survive, not enough to belong. This was the first space that felt like mine, even if it was barely bigger than a box. Inside, everything smelled faintly of wet cardboard and the citrus cleaner the agent had sprayed before handing me the keys. I left my shoes in the genkan, rolled my futon out in the only corner that didn't creak, and stood by the window to listen. The rain softened the city until it sounded like distant applause, and under that, so low I might have missed it, there was a hum, a single note. Not the refrigerator, not the old air conditioner coughing behind its yellowed grill, just a low, steady sound, like someone humming a single note behind the wall I shared with the next apartment, number 302. I told myself I was tired. My ears were ringing from the move, and the rain made strange harmonies in old buildings. I opened the balcony door to let the air move through. The hum didn't change. It stayed through unboxing, through a bowl of instant curry, through a late-night trip to the convenience store for garbage bags and painter's tape. It was still there when I turned out the light. When I finally drifted off, the sound followed me into sleep. I dreamed I was standing in a corridor of glass, hands pressed to a wall that bowed inward like plastic wrap. Behind it was gray water that rippled with the soft weight of the hum. Each flash of lightning lit my reflection in that glass, pale, slow, and blurred by the moving water. When I woke, the rain was still falling, lighter now, more of a veil than a curtain. I made coffee on the single burner stove, burned my thumb, and cursed my own clumsiness. The apartment was little more than a box, a sink, a tiny bathroom, a balcony just wide enough for a clothes rod and one hopeful plant. It was all I could afford. I told myself the sound came from the building's drain stack. Old pipes hum under constant rain. At work, the day passed in screens and emails. When I mentioned the weather, my coworker Sato smiled and said, "Good sleeping weather." I almost told him about the hum, but stopped. It felt silly to even say aloud. By the time I got home, my jeans were soaked to the shin, and the flickering hallway light looked ready to die. The hum met me at the door, unchanged, patient, waiting. That night, I knocked on the wall where the sound seemed strongest, the wall I shared with 302. I hadn't seen anyone go in or out. Not during the move, not since. The hum didn't react. But for a moment, I thought I heard something else. Not a voice, but the shift of weight on a floorboard, or water moving inside a pipe. I pressed my ear to the plaster. It was cool. The sound grew louder, skull had been tuned to it. A long, low note with a faint second tone beneath it, wavering, alive. It felt like leaning into an organ's drone. I stepped back. "Sorry," I whispered to the wall and laughed at myself. That night, I dreamed again, this time of my own corridor. The fluorescent buzz mixed with the hum. The door to 302 was closed and wet, beads of water forming along the frame and dripping one by one to the carpet runner. I reached for the handle. It was cold enough to sting. On the third day, the rain came hard enough that the gutters overflowed. As I left for work, a man in blue coveralls stood at the end of the hall. A cigarette hung soft from his lips. "Sink?" he asked. "Mine's fine," I said. 302, he grunted, nodding toward the wall between our doors. "Water complaint." "Someone lives there?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Always someone," he said. He didn't smile. That night, when I came home, there was a notice taped to the door frame of 302, printed kanji under a plastic sleeve wrinkled with damp. I could read a few words. Inspection. Enter with manager. The date was today. The hum was softer under the evening rain, and for the first time it made me angry. I knocked 3 times, then louder. "Sumimasen," I called. "Neighbor, are you okay?" No answer. But the paper notice trembled, just slightly, as if the door had exhaled. I went downstairs to the manager's office. The glass cubicle was empty except for a crooked calendar. I pressed the bell and waited. Eventually, the manager appeared, a small woman in a rain shell, folder clutched to her chest. 302, I said. "The notice." She nodded. "We will check tomorrow morning. Is someone in there? Do you hear the sound?" She tilted her head, listening to the building like it was a person. "Old pipes," she said. Then softly, "Tomorrow." I didn't sleep. Without the heavy rain to hide it, the hum filled the apartment, curling into corners, whispering through the bathroom tiles. Around 2, I gave up. I sat by the wall and placed my hand against it. My skin warmed the paint. The wall felt warm in return. A ridiculous part of me imagined someone else doing the same on the other side. 2 lonely people separated by a few inches of plaster. "Hey," I whispered. "Are you okay?" The hum rose, held, and for a heartbeat, I thought it almost formed a syllable. My name, maybe. The idea made me cry, quietly, without understanding why. Loneliness has a sound, and I think I heard mine answered. Morning came gray and blurred. The manager's voice outside 302 brought me to the door. She stood with the man in coveralls and another older man holding a heavy ring of keys. The hallway was damp. The light buzzed. They tried the keys. The door resisted like there was weight behind it. When it opened, the smell hit us first. Clean at the top like rain, sour underneath, like a mop left too long. There was water on the floor, a thin layer that spread out like oil. Inside, the light from the hall caught a room that shimmered. The floor was wet. The walls were wet. Shirts hung from a clothes rod over the balcony, dripping in perfect rhythm. The hum thickened, visible now in the way the water rippled along the baseboards. "Leak," the coveralls man said, but it didn't sound convincing. I stepped closer. The water wasn't just on the floor. It clung to the wall, a clear bulge, like a film stretched tight, trembling as if it were holding something back. Light rippled through it with every sound. "Don't go in," the manager said. Something moved behind the film, not a reflection, but a shape, slow and heavy, like a shadow caught chest vibrated with it. For a second, it almost sounded like two notes searching for each other. The older man shut off the water. The pipes moaned, but the hum stayed. "Resident?" I asked. The manager turned a page on her clipboard, lips moving over names I didn't recognize. No one answered. They sealed the door and called someone. Plumbers came, rolling up the soaked carpet runner, draining the floor with a long hose that led out into the parking lot. When they were done, 302 looked normal again. Too normal, like an aquarium after the fish are gone. The hum softened, but it didn't stop. A week later, the manager replaced the fluorescent. She stapled a new notice on 302's frame. Work complete. That night, with the rain gone to a mist, the hum was still there under everything, quiet, steady, alive. I told myself it was the refrigerator, or the AC, or the city's transformers humming through the walls. I told myself names were a kind of protection. Call a thing by the right word, and it stays inside it. Around 3:30 a.m., the point in the night when the city forgets to pretend, my phone vibrated on the floor. No number, just the word call. I stared until it stopped. Then it rang again. I answered. I didn't hear a voice, just a pressure, like water pressing against my ear. A low tone, the same hum coming through the wall. "Are you okay?" I whispered. The tone widened, not louder, not softer, just fuller, thick with overtones, almost human. Maybe it was the line, maybe it was me, maybe the building had decided to answer. The call ended. The screen said 12 seconds. I set the phone down and placed my palm against the wall. It was warm. The hum felt like it had settled inside me, searching for its pair. In the morning, the rain had finally stopped. The sky over the rail yard was paper white. People on the street walked faster, as if the city had been forgiven. I made coffee, burned my tongue, and laughed. I texted Sato a picture of the sky. The hum is still here. Maybe it always will be. Maybe there is no one in 302, or maybe something of them remains. I once read that water remembers what it touches, that it can hold traces of emotion like tiny ghosts. Maybe this hum is the memory of whoever lived there before me. Loneliness, grief, something that never left. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I don't knock. I don't apologize. I just listen. Some nights, when the air is heavy and the trains sound far away, I hum back. Not a conversation, more like a promise. When my voice finds the right pitch, the plaster vibrates under my hand, and I feel the faintest pull, like two people on either side of a screen. In that moment, I don't feel lonely anymore, and I'm sure whoever or whatever was left behind on the other side feels a little comforted as well. They sent me to the lighthouse at the edge of Norway's western coast, a lonely tower called North Point Light, perched on a narrow black rock that juts into the North Sea. I work for the Coastal Directorate, maintenance, radio checks, and temporary duty when one of the keepers went ashore. When the regular man took leave to visit his daughter on the mainland, they called me to fill in. 2 weeks alone, they said. Just keep the beacon burning through the storms. And out here, the storms can last for days. By the time the supply boat that brought me here from the mainland vanished into the mist, the waves were already rising. The sea around North Point never really sleeps, always moving, always restless, as if remembering something it can't forget. The island itself was barely an island at all, a slab of dark stone, maybe 30 meters across, with the lighthouse rising straight out of its center like a white bone. A narrow jetty curved out from the rock, slick with moss and salt. At high tide, the steps disappeared completely, leaving the tower cut off from the world. Inside, the building smelled of oil, rust, and old paint. The spiral staircase wound upward through 3 small levels: the storage deck, the keeper's quarters, and finally, the lantern room. My bunk sat against the wall beside a rust-stained window that looked out over nothing but gray water. I spent the first day settling in, checking the fuel drums, testing the backup generator, cleaning the glass of the lantern. Everything was in order. For lunch, I opened a tin of fish stew and ate it straight from the pot while sitting by the narrow window. From up there, the sea looked endless, flat gray stretching into fog. Sometimes, if you watched long enough, you could swear something moved beneath it, dark and slow, just under the surface. In the afternoon, I wrote my first entry in the logbook. 0800 hours, arrived North Point Light. Equipment in serviceable condition. Weather, overcast, swell moderate. Visibility, poor. By evening, the wind had started to rise. I made coffee on the paraffin stove and sat by the radio, listening to bursts of static and the occasional trawler report from far down the coast. At sunset, though in winter, it's more a dimming than a setting, I climbed to the lantern room and lit the wick. The great lens turned slowly, throwing a beam of gold into the mist. Out here, when night comes, it doesn't fall. It rises. Rain hammered the glass until the tower trembled. Wind screamed through the railings, making the metal sing like a ghost in the walls. Inside, the air smelled of salt and kerosene. I played a few hands of solitaire to pass the time, the cards curling at the corners from the damp. Every hour I went up to check the flame, winding the mechanism, trimming the wick, watching the beam sweep across the black water. At midnight, I made another pot of coffee and stood by the window. The sea below heaved and rolled, white foam clawing at the rocks. There's a rhythm to it, a heartbeat that becomes part of you if you listen long enough. When I finally lay down, the tower still shuddered with every gust. The rain became a single steady hiss, like radio static without a voice. I dreamed of waves. Morning broke gray and quiet, the storm's fury spent. The sea looked calmer, but it was the kind of calm that hides movement underneath, the long breathing of something ancient. I cleaned the lantern glass, scraped salt from the walkway rails, and logged the weather again. Breakfast was powdered eggs and black coffee. For lunch, canned meatballs. Everything tasted faintly of rust and salt. Afterwards, I sat at the desk in the keeper's room and wrote a few letters I'd never send. One to my sister, another to no one at all. It's something I do on postings like this. The paper listens better than most people. By late afternoon, the wind had shifted to the northwest. The temperature dropped. Gulls circled once or twice and vanished inland, a sure sign another storm was on its way. The rain started again before dark. By 8, the sea was roaring against the rocks. I was writing the evening log when the radio hissed to life beside me. "Lightkeeper, do you copy?" The voice was faint, broken by static, but clear enough to stop me mid-sentence. "Copy that," I said, pressing the button. "This is North Point Light. Identify yourself." The little screen on the set glowed Channel 16, the international distress frequency, which meant whoever was calling me wasn't just talking, they were asking for help. A pause, then the same voice again, low, calm, almost polite. "Can you see us?" I frowned. "Negative. Visibility's near 0. What's your position?" Static swallowed the line. Then a whisper slipped through, almost lost beneath the wind. "Hold your light." Then the radio went silent. I waited. 1 minute, then another. Nothing. Probably interference, I told myself. Out here, the sea loves to play tricks. Still, I made a note in the logbook. 22:14 hours, unidentified vessel. Poor connection. When I finally went to bed, the voice stayed with me. It sounded strangely familiar, like a memory I couldn't quite hold on to. The next day, the storm was worse than before. The whole tower shook with each strike of wind. The air inside was thick with the smell of salt and kerosene. Sometime before dawn, the lantern had gone out. Seawater had gotten into the fuse box, shorting the circuit. It wasn't a bad failure, but it kept me working most of the day to get the light burning steady again before nightfall. It was the lightkeeper's duty, especially in weather like this, to make sure no ship out there lost its way. I'd just finished dinner when the radio crackled again, louder this time. "Lightkeeper, Eric, my name." I sat upright so fast the chair nearly fell. "This is North Point Light," I said quickly. "Who is this?" "Identify yourself." The static deepened, then cleared, and through it, the voice came again. "We're close. Hold your light steady." "Steady as ever," I said, checking the dials. "You shouldn't be out in this weather." "What's your ship's name?" A pause, then, "Skarsund." I froze. The Skarsund was my father's ship. He'd been a sailor all his life. When I was 8, his vessel went missing in a storm off this very coast. They said it went down too fast for anyone to send a signal. No wreck was ever found. That was 40 years ago. And now, someone on that same ship was calling me. "Repeat that," I said, my voice barely steady. "Say again, vessel name." "Skarsund, outbound from Bergen. We can see your light." My heartbeat roared in my ears. I went to the window, wiping away the condensation. Nothing, just waves and rain. The beam from the lantern cut across the sea, but the world beyond was empty. "Listen to me," I said into the mic. "If you're adrift, I can contact rescue." "What's your heading?" The radio hissed sharply, cutting me off. Then, through the noise, a single sentence. "You look just like him." Every muscle in my body went cold. "Who?" I whispered. "Who are you talking about?" The static rose like a wave, thick and endless. Beneath it came another sound, long and low, like a hull scraping against stone. I grabbed my flashlight and ran up the spiral stairs to the lantern room. The air smelled of oil and the metallic tang of rain leaking through the seams. The light rotated steadily, painting the ocean in pale gold. I pressed my hands to the cold glass and scanned the horizon. And then, lightning. For the briefest flash, I saw it. A ship. A black silhouette riding low in the water, too still to be real. The light caught the name painted across the side, half faded, eaten by rust, but still legible. Skarsund. Then it was gone. I waited for another flash. Nothing. Just the waves again. Down below, the radio came back to life. A different voice this time. "Eric, can you see us?" I didn't move, because I knew that voice. I'd know it anywhere. It was my father. "Eric, are you there?" My father's voice came again from the radio, breaking through my shock. I stumbled down the stairs, heart pounding. The radio light glowed red in the dark, a single, unblinking eye. I pressed the button with shaking hands and barely believing what was happening. "This is North Point Station. Who am I speaking to?" The voice came through softer this time, but closer, as if the speaker was standing right behind the wall. "We're almost home, son." I could barely breathe. "Dad," I said, "I was just a boy. I didn't know how to find you." There was a faint sound on the line, not static, not sea. A breath, maybe. Then his voice, softer now, full of something that could have been pride or sorrow or both. "You did. You kept the light." And in that instant, I realized what day it was. The anniversary of the Scar Sun's disappearance. The storm outside was almost as fierce as the one that had taken her. The lighthouse itself had been built only a few years after that storm, not just for the Scar Sund, but for all the ships and lives the sea had claimed before anyone thought to raise a warning light here. The beam I'd repaired that morning was cutting through the same dark waters my father had vanished in. Maybe keeping it burning tonight had meant more than I could ever have imagined. My throat tightened. I leaned closer to the radio, my voice barely a whisper. "Where are you?" I asked. "Tell me where you are." There was a single click, the sound of someone pressing the transmit button on the other end. Then my father's voice came through one last time, quiet and certain. "Right where the sea left us." The line went dead. Only the storm remained, the wind clawing at the glass, the slow ticking of rain against the window. When morning came, the sea was calm, as if nothing had ever happened. I sat in the lantern room for hours, staring at the horizon. The water was still, too still. No wreck, no voice, no trace of anything. Later that afternoon, the supply boat returned. The deckhand waved up at me, then shouted as he stepped inside, dripping from the spray. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. I managed a weak smile. "Something like that." He set down a crate of fuel. "Funny thing," he added. "When we were docking, sonar picked up something, a faint metal echo, maybe 50 meters down. Probably an old wreck. Might have been buried before. Storms like this can move the seabed around." I didn't answer. My eyes stayed fixed on the sea. The tower above me stood quiet now, its lantern dark against the pale morning sky. But inside, I knew what they would find. The Scar Sund had finally found its way home. That night, I checked the radio again. It was still on, but only static answered. I listened anyway, letting the noise fill the room. And somewhere in that faint white hiss, I thought I heard it again. A whisper carried on the current, quiet but unmistakable. "Keep your light steady." I did. And even now, back on the mainland, I still listen when the fog rolls in. Because the sea remembers everything that's ever fallen into it. The ships, the storms, the voices. And some voices never stop calling home. You learn to respect the weather when you drive for a living in Kenya. Out here, the road decides what kind of man you are long before you reach the next town. My name's Daniel Mwangi, 38 years old, and I've spent a lot of time behind the steering wheel of long-distance buses, hauling passengers up and down the highways that cut through the Rift Valley. I'd signed the night roster at the Nakuru Depot. The town sits deep in the valley, about halfway between Nairobi and the Western Highlands. By the time I took the Eldama ravine route, thunder was already pacing over the valley. The air smelled of diesel and dust turning to mud. In this part of the country, storms don't pass. They settle in, sometimes for days, until the road becomes a long black river that remembers every accident it's ever seen. Still, someone had to drive. That someone was me. They called it a short trip, 2 hours kilometers from Nakuru to Eldama ravine. But anyone who's done that stretch at night knows better. The road winds like it's trying to remember itself, with blind turns and half-finished guardrails. When the rain comes, even the headlights look nervous. I'd been doing this for 14 years, and 2 years ago, on this same road, I killed 10 people. A brake line burst on the descent. By the time I hit the curve, there was nothing left to stop us. I managed to throw myself out through the side door just before the bus went over the edge. That's the only reason I'm still here. Since then, I've driven only short daytime routes, local, safe. But when the dispatcher said the night driver had fallen sick and they needed someone to cover the midnight Eldama run, I said yes. Maybe it was guilt, maybe pride. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself the road didn't still own me. The bus smelled of rain, oil, and tiredness. There were 8 passengers when we left the depot. 2 students with backpacks, a woman in a yellow scarf, an old man with a walking stick, 2 laborers in muddy boots, and a young couple sharing a pair of headphones. I counted them, a habit I'd picked up after the crash. 8 souls, and me. The wipers fought to keep up. The headlights carved 2 pale tunnels through the rain, but the world beyond them was black and endless. The radio crackled with static. Somewhere ahead, lightning flashed, painting the road silver for half a heartbeat before it vanished again. We picked up another pair of passengers just past the weighbridge. A woman standing in the rain with a small child pressed to her shoulder. She didn't wave. She just stood there, straight-backed in the rain, like she'd been waiting exactly for this bus. No one should have been walking that stretch at that hour, but she was there, so I slowed. She climbed on board without a word. The child didn't cry, didn't even move. Rain dripped from her shawl onto the floor. I wanted to tell her to dry off, to be careful not to slip, but something in her eyes made the words stop halfway. She walked down the aisle and sat 3 rows from the back. 10 passengers, same number as before. The rain got heavier as we climbed toward the highlands. In Kenya, storms can feel alive, like they're thinking. They breathe, shift, and circle you until you forget what dry air feels like. The wind slammed the bus from both sides, and every gust sounded like a crowd whispering outside. The passengers had gone quiet. No one talked, not even the students. The couple sat apart now. The old man's head dipped forward in sleep, but I could see his eyes open in the mirror. The kilometer signs began to blur through the rain. Eldama ravine, 24 kilometers. I saw the number and felt my chest tighten. That stretch of road, I knew it. It was near the spot where the crash had happened 2 years ago. The same bend, the same slope. The memories came back all at once. The horn, the screams, the sudden drop. I gripped the wheel a little tighter and kept driving. That's when the whispers started. At first, I thought it was the radio again, bits of half-heard chatter from truck drivers or weather reports. But the voices weren't coming from the speakers. They were coming from the back of the bus, soft, layered, like a dozen people trying to remember the same prayer. I looked in the rear-view mirror. For a second, everything looked normal. The pale outlines of tired travelers, faces turned toward the windows. Then lightning flashed. The light froze everything, every face, every drop of water in the air, and in that half second, none of them looked alive. Their skin was pale and wet, their mouths hung open, and their eyes, every single one of them, were staring directly at me. The flash ended. Darkness again. My hands clenched the steering wheel until my fingers ached. The wipers thudded once, twice, trying to catch up with the rain. child still sat motionless, her shawl dripping slowly onto the floor. I told myself I was overtired. I kept driving, but the whispers didn't stop. The next lightning bolt hit close. I felt it through the steering column, and this time, when the bus lit up, I saw it clearly. The old man's face was gone, only the dark shape of a skull beneath thin, blistered skin. The student's eyes were white, rolled up, empty. The couple sat stiffly, their hands fused together by something dark and wet. And the woman with the child, her shawl had slipped, revealing that what she was holding wasn't a child at all. It was a bundle of soaked cloth, folded tight around nothing. The light went out again. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt locked from the inside. The bus engine roared as I pressed the accelerator, trying to outrun something that had already caught me. The whispers behind me grew louder. They weren't random anymore. They were saying my name. "Daniel," they murmured. "Daniel, you left us." I gripped the wheel tighter. My vision blurred. The wipers couldn't keep up. Lightning flashed again, and now every passenger had turned to face me. Every seat, every set of eyes. I could feel their gaze pressing against the back of my neck like cold hands. I wanted to pull over, but there was no shoulder, no safe space, just a drop into darkness. "Please," I whispered, my voice trembling, "please forgive me. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't see the curve. I swear I didn't." The whispering stopped. Silence filled the bus, thick and heavy, like water closing over a drowning man. Then one voice, the woman carrying the child, not angry, not loud, just sad. "You should have said it sooner." The headlights flickered. The engine stuttered once, twice, then died. The bus coasted in silence, rolling to a stop in the middle of the rain. I turned around. They were all staring, not moving, not breathing. The woman in the shawl raised her head. Her lips parted. "Forgive us, too." The world exploded in white light. I woke up gasping. For a moment, I thought I was still driving, still gripping the wheel, but I was in my apartment. My flat in Nakuru was silent except for the rain. A single room above a mechanic's garage, the kind of place that always smelled faintly of rubber and rust. The window was open, the curtains were soaked, rain tapped against the sill. I sat up slowly. My clothes were drenched. Mud streaked my shoes, and a puddle had formed beneath the bed. In my pocket, the keys to the bus route. It was morning. The rain had softened to a drizzle. My throat hurt like it does when you've been shouting. Was it a dream? A nightmare? If it was, then why did my hands still smell of diesel and rain? That evening, I drove out to the bend, the crash site, the same stretch where the bus went off the road 2 years ago. It's easy to miss now, just a stretch of cracked guardrail and a cluster of wild flowers growing through the mud. Someone had left plastic roses there once, now faded white by the sun. I parked, got out, and stood in the drizzle. The road was silent except for the occasional hiss of tires far away. I knelt, touched the cold ground, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The words came easier this time. I said them again and again, for every voice, for every face. I thought of each and every one of those 10 poor souls and said a soft prayer for them, for every seat that never made it to Eldama. When I finally stood, the air was still. No wind, no movement, nothing. And then, just as I turned to leave, a small breeze brushed my cheek. Gentle, cool, the kind that shouldn't exist when the trees around you are perfectly still. It lasted only a second, but I knew. It was enough. I took it as a sign, a whisper of forgiveness from those I couldn't save. That night, I slept for the first time in years, and in my dream, the bus was full again, not of ghosts, but of people laughing softly in the dark. Their faces were just faces, their eyes were calm, and for the first time, the road to Eldama didn't feel endless. It just felt quiet and forgiving. I'd spent the last week in Atlanta, a blur of conference rooms, coffee breath, and PowerPoint slides. By the fifth day, I couldn't tell one handshake from another. By the time Friday rolled around, I just wanted to go home. Back to Denver, back to quiet, back to a bed that didn't hum with air conditioning. I never used to have a problem with flying. In fact, I used to love business travel. The hum of the terminal, the thrill of taking off, the small satisfaction of watching the city shrink below you. But a bad flight a few years ago had changed that. A thunderstorm over Chicago. A sudden drop. The kind that makes your stomach hit your ribs and the woman beside you grab your arm like she's drowning. Since then, every boarding pass feels like a dare I'm forced to take. My return flight was the last one out, 9:45 p.m., Delta 217. Outside, the rain was relentless, hammering against the terminal glass so hard it sounded like applause. The runway lights stretched into long red streaks across the wet tarmac. I found my seat, 14C, aisle, always aisle. A man pretending he isn't afraid of flying needs somewhere to look that isn't the window. The cabin smelled faintly of coffee, recycled air, and damp coats. Someone behind me coughed. A baby fussed near the back. The captain's voice came over the speakers, calm and practiced. "Good evening, folks. This is your captain, Michael Dawson. We're cleared for takeoff to Denver. Expect a little weather on the way up, but once we're above 10,000 feet, things should smooth out. Estimated flight time, 2 hours, 25 minutes. Sit back, relax, and we'll have you home before midnight." Home before midnight. I wanted to believe that. I slipped on my noise-canceling headphones and hit play. I always listen to One by Metallica. It's been my takeoff ritual for years. The track starts slow, that clean, echoing guitar just under the rising whine of the engines. When the double bass drums kick in, so does the acceleration. The plane thundered down the runway, lights streaking by in red and white. The wheels lifted. That familiar drop in the gut hit me, not from fear, but from gravity reminding you how small you are. The cabin lights were dimmed to a faint glow, standard takeoff procedure. I gripped the armrest just tight enough for the plastic to bite into my palm, but outwardly I stayed calm. Eyes forward. Breathe. Lightning flashed far ahead, bright enough to light the whole cabin for a second. Then it faded, and everything went back to that same quiet, dim light. 10 minutes later, the seatbelt sign chimed off. The rain softened to a hiss against the fuselage. Across the aisle, a little boy lifted a toy plane and made soft, whooshing sounds while his mother hushed him gently. The sound made my pulse jump. The flight attendant stopped beside me. Her badge read, "Lauren." "Sir, meal preference? Chicken or pasta?" "Chicken," I said automatically. She smiled and moved on. The solo from One screamed through my headphones, fast, sharp, and precise, with the double bass drums hammering like a machine gun. The song ended after about 7 minutes, and I let it loop. I always do when I fly. Somehow it makes the turbulence feel predictable, like I can control the chaos if I just keep the same song playing. The first jolt came without warning, quick and hard enough to make utensils clink. A few nervous murmurs. Lauren steadied herself against the overhead bin. I paused the music. The silence felt heavier than the storm. Outside, lightning webbed across the sky. The captain's voice returned, still calm, but tighter now. Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit some heavier turbulence. We're currently at 33,000 feet. Please fasten your seatbelts and remain seated until the fasten seatbelt sign is turned off. Another jolt. The lights flickered. Then came the sound. A sharp electric crack that didn't belong to thunder. The cabin flashed white. In that frozen second, I saw it, lightning striking the left engine. A blinding arc. A roar. Then fire. The lights died. The plane tilted left. Screams. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Lauren fell to her knees, reaching for a seat. I braced against the armrest. Outside, the wing burned against the rain. The boys' toy plane rolled down the aisle. The engine coughed once more, and everything went white. I woke with a violent jerk, heart pounding, throat dry, cabin lights normal, engine steady, passengers calm. Lauren stood beside me, tray in hand. "Sir? Chicken or pasta?" For a second I couldn't speak. My hands were trembling. My shirt clung to me, damp with sweat. "Chicken," I whispered finally. Lauren paused. Her polite smile softened into concern. "Are you all right, sir?" I nodded quickly. Yeah, I'm fine." She hesitated, then moved on down the aisle. Across the aisle, the little boy raised his toy plane, making that same soft whooshing sound. Every detail was identical. His striped shirt, his mother's tired eyes, the faint reflection of lightning in the window. The same. All of it. The music still played faintly through my headphones. Metallica's One halfway through the solo, even though I hadn't touched the player. I ripped the headphones off. The sound stopped, but the rhythm kept pulsing inside my head, mechanical and relentless. Then the first jolt hit. Same sound, same angle. The utensils clinked. Someone gasped. Lauren steadied herself against the overhead bin. Her eyes flicked toward me, worried this time, not professional. "Sir, please keep your seatbelt fastened," she said. "I know," I breathed. "I know what happens next." She frowned, about to ask what I meant, and then the turbulence hit again, harder. Lightning flashed across the wing. The engine roared. The captain's voice came over the intercom, identical in tone and timing. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit some heavier turbulence. We're currently at 33,000 feet. Please fasten your seatbelts and remain seated until the sign is turned off." "No," I whispered. "Not again." Outside, a blinding arc tore through the clouds, lightning striking the left engine. A deafening crack. A burst of fire against the rain. The plane tilted. Oxygen masks dropped. Screams filled the cabin. I turned to Lauren. She was on her knees again, reaching for a seat. The boys' toy plane rolled down the aisle, exactly the same. "Please," I said, choking on the word. "Please stop." But the sound of the burning engine drowned everything out. And then, white light. Silence. I woke again. Same seat, same rain, same question. "Sir, chicken or pasta?" This time I didn't answer. I just stared at her. My heart was already pounding, as if it remembered before my mind did. Lauren's smile faltered. "Sir?" I unbuckled my seatbelt. "Where's the captain?" "Excuse me? I need to speak to the captain." "Now." Her polite calm broke a little. "Sir, please remain seated." We're about to, but I was already standing. Passengers turned. The boy with the toy plane stopped mid-flight, his eyes wide. "I know what's about to happen," I shouted. "You have to listen. We need to turn around." Lauren stepped forward, blocking the aisle. "Sir, please, the lightning. It's going to hit the left engine." Someone laughed nervously. Another passenger muttered something about too many drinks. "I'm not crazy," I said louder now. "It happens every time." The plane jolted, that same quick, violent dip. Utensils clinked, gasps echoed. "See?" I yelled. "It's starting." Lauren grabbed my arm as the captain's voice came through the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit some heavier turbulence." "No," I shouted at the ceiling. "Don't say it again." Lightning split the sky. The left engine flared. Lauren screamed, and then the oxygen masks dropped. I was still standing when the plane went white, still shouting, still unheard. When I woke again, I was already crying. Same seat, same sound of rain on metal, same smell of coffee and recycled air. Lauren appeared like clockwork. "Sir, chicken or pasta?" I started laughing. I couldn't stop. Her face blurred behind tears. She set the tray down carefully, watching me like I might break. "Sir, please try to calm down." "How many times is this now?" I asked her. 10? 15? She didn't answer. She just blinked. I turned toward the boy. He was already raising the toy plane. The whooshing sound filled the space between thunderclaps. "Don't do it," I said quietly. "Don't make that sound." He looked confused, then smiled, and the plane jolted again. They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. But what do you call it when you do different things, and the result still never changes? I tried everything. I begged. I screamed. Once, I prayed. Once, I convinced Lauren to let me talk to the captain. She led me up the aisle while the passengers stared. I told him about the lightning, the fire, the loop. He didn't laugh. He just looked at me, pale and tight-lipped, and said, "We'll turn back to Atlanta. Just sit down, son." And the moment he turned the plane around, lightning struck. Earlier this time. Harder. The world went white again. I don't know how many times it's been now. Maybe 100. Each time I try something new. Warn earlier, stay silent, pretend to sleep. But the result never changes. Sometimes the storm starts sooner, sometimes later. Sometimes Lauren never makes it down the aisle before it hits. But always, the light, the fire, the silence. I know the words by heart now. The captain's steady voice, Lauren's careful smile, the boy's whooshing sound. My own heartbeat trying to escape my ribs. Every time, I tell myself I'll try one last thing. But deep down, I know it won't work. Because when the lightning comes, it always finds us. And every time I wake, the first thing I hear is her voice. "Sir, chicken or pasta?" And I say, "Does it really matter?"